I'm thrilled to turn now to a man who has had a close encounter of the worst kind with adherence to Sharia, now becoming increasingly not only assertive but aggressive in his native country of Great Britain. He's the director of a marvelous organization called the Center for Social Cohesion. He's Douglas Murray. Douglas, welcome to Secure Freedom Radio. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Now, tell us about your hair-raising and frankly, quite frightening encounter of just, I guess, the past day or so.
Sure. It occurred last night here in London. I was invited several months ago by an organization that said it was a student organization. They called themselves the Global Issues Society. And they invited me to do a debate on Sharia, which I do several times a week in London at the moment. And I was asked by this organization. They said it was a student organization and they were impartial. I agreed to do it, and they then said that they'd like to...
What was the topic?
The topic was Sharia. It was whether Sharia law is going to be better for Britain than British law.
And I think our audience has become fairly aware of what Sharia is. Explain quickly what the alternative to British law is that's being proposed.
Well, the alternative that this particular, that my opponent from last night, Anjem Choudary of the group Muhajiroun, which is effectively banned in the UK, what they particularly propose in their version of Sharia is basically a medievalist version, a literal version of Islamic law derived from the Quran and Hadith of Muhammad, the sayings of Muhammad, and they are literalists in it. This includes, of course, the most extreme forms, the chopping off of the hands of thieves, the flogging of adulterers, the stoning, beheading, the lot.
They're seriously proposing that would be a preferable legal arrangement to the British Code of law. And
my opponent, Mr. Choudary, himself, actually, the Daily Mail over here recently showed photos of him as a student when he was less Sharia inclined than he might be now, and he's pictured drinking pints of beer and looking at sort of naked pornography magazines with friends and smoking cannabis. One of the points I really wanted to make to him last night was I'm very glad we don't have Sharia, because apart from anything else, he wouldn't have as many limbs as he has if it had been instituted in his youth.
To flip the pages of his pornographic magazines and drink his pints.
Exactly. I'm happy for him to get on with that if he wants to, but I wouldn't want that instituted either.
There you go.
But Mr. Choudary was put up as my opponent. I have actually encountered him before. He's one of the more loudmouth extremists in Britain. His group, Muhajiroun, was effectively disbanded when Tony Blair threatened to ban them in 2004. The offshoot organizations were banned, made illegal. And
banned on the grounds that they were involved in terrorism or supportive of terrorism?
Incitement to violence, terrorism. We worked out recently in my centre that 1 in 7 of the Islamists imprisoned in the UK for terror-related offences in recent years has been a member of this group.
No kidding.
What happened?
Daniel, I want you to hold on just 1 second. Excuse me, Daniel. Douglas, I want you to hold on just 1 second, please. Sure. We're going to take a short pause, and I want, when you come back, to give us the gory details of what happened or almost happened to you at the hands of Mr. Choudary. You're listening to Secure Freedom Radio with Frank Gaffney and Douglas Murray. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Secure Freedom Radio.
Now more from Frank Gaffney.
This is indeed Frank Gaffney with you with Secure Freedom Radio and Douglas Murray of the Center for Social Cohesion in Great Britain. All right, before the break, Douglas, you were leading up to a momentous confrontation between you and people who have been associated with violent terrorism in Britain, and what happened next?
Well, I've debated Mr. Choudary twice before, once in a studio of the BBC's and once at an independent debate last year. So I don't find his own particularly wacky ideas difficult to take on. I think he probably knows this. But what he tried to do last night turned out to be a setup. The organization that had invited me turned out to be a front for his terrorist group.
No kidding.
Recently announced that they had reformed. this group. They have got a sort of air pocket because the British government still hasn't banned them, and they've decided to take advantage of this. I discovered I had colleagues who turned up at the event last night ahead of me, and they told me that, first of all, it turned out that security for the event we'd been promised were actually members of Al-Muhajiroun.
Oh, no.
It turned out that the so-called independent chair had actually already assaulted a friend of mine, a member of the audience, before the event began. He was left pretty bloodied, but it's all right.
This was the person who was moderating the event?
The moderator attacked a member of the audience before the event even started.
Oh, my Lord. It was a trap.
And what's more, they insisted on separation of the sexes. The men were allowed to sit downstairs, the women had to sit in the balcony upstairs. And it has to be said, don't have, followers or anything. Occasionally.
Well, I'm one of your followers, Douglas, I have to say.
Occasionally people want to come to hear me speak, but I don't exactly have a sort of claque, as we used to call them here. Mr. Choudary, however, does, and it turned out that the audience and the organisers and everything of this event was the entire Al-Muhajiroun front.
Oh, my Lord.
I don't know quite what they were expecting to do to me, but I had taken the precaution, which I have to say I've never felt the need to do before, but I got more and more concerned before the debate. I am still intending to turn up. I managed to arrange 2 private security guards to just be near me in case anyone tried to do anything to me. Mm-hmm. And of course, unarmed, as all security guards are in this country, but they're pretty tall men, so they were taller than me at any rate. And I was told to
a deterrent. We like to think of that as.
The police, told me to keep away from the hall, and the hall ended up being cleared because there was a dust-up punch-up. A sort of riot ensued even before I arrived. And they were shouting Allah Akbar, Allah is great. They were chanting jihadist slogans. And I said to my security detail that I thought it was important that I at least showed up at the place. That the press who were there ought to see that I wouldn't be kept away.
All right. Now, let me again reframe this for those of you who've just joined us. You're listening to Secure Freedom Radio. I'm your host, Frank Gaffney. You're talking with Douglas Murray of the Center for Social Cohesion in Britain, an organization that has been devoted to preserving freedom in Britain and protecting its people against the very sort of thing that he was confronting on this evening. Douglas was just recounting how he was, in effect, trapped, brought in under false pretenses into a very potentially violent, in fact, I guess actually violent setting. And what happened next?
Well, I arrived 45 minutes after the thing was meant to start, having been advised to stay away by the police for at least a time until things quietened down. I then was dropped off. I appeared on the pavement, and the crowd started to swarm toward me. I immediately gave interviews to the press who were there, explained to them that I could see this was a set-up job, and tried to find out what had been going on, and certainly give my opinion of the people who were inflicting violence and threatening violence. I went into the hall. Everything was being cleared away, so I came out, and the crowd started to chant. It was very interesting. I was sort of walking away from the hall.
More of this Allah Akbar business? They
started chanting Allah Akbar, and also I'll use the abbreviation, but effing kufar is the phrase, which means a kufar is a derogatory term for a non-Muslim, a very, very derogatory term. Right. They were shouting as an organized bunch, effing kufar at me.
Kufar is often used in the same context as sort of the most murderous of exhortations of Sharia, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. And some pretty sort of low-grade homophobic abuse, and also the strange sight of seeing 100 screaming mob shouting "coward" at me. So I turned around and I said, they said I was walking away. So I turned around and I said, well, fine, I'll debate you in the street. I'm not scared of that. And eventually, as the mob sort of surged towards me, their leader emerged from it, and we talked briefly, and I said in front of the press and in front of his followers.
This is Choudary you're talking about, the leader.
Choudary. Yeah. I said to him very clearly that I was willing to take on his opinions any time, had done before, will do again, but I can't do so in a situation where I or my friends or colleagues would be assaulted. or have violence inflicted upon us. And the result was we had a very brief altercation, and I asked Mr. Choudary a couple of questions. I said to him, look, we at the Centre have analysed your group. We know that 1 in 7 Islamists convicted of terrorist offences in recent years has been from your group, and he denied it. Mm-hmm. He said that was just a lie. I said, well, it's the case.
Tell us the name again, Douglas Murray,
Muhajiroun,
of the group. Okay.
And he denied it. So I said, well, are you saying that the police are liars? He said, yes. And I said, are you saying that the courts are liars? He said, yes, they're liars. I said, are the Crown Prosecution Service and the government and the press liars? He said, yes, they're all liars. And I said, in other words, none of this happened. And he said, no Muslim is ever guilty.
Aha.
So
another benefit of Sharia law, I guess.
Quite. You never have to look back. You're never guilty.
Never having to say you're sorry in a whole new way.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, Douglas, what was the denouement? You were extracted by helicopter or police escort?
The police and security managed to get me out. After that, I signaled to them that I thought that
it was time to go.
Finishing on that line was fine. Some of them tried to surge forward, and they decided it was time to get me out. So they chased us to the cars, but we were okay. And I celebrated in the way that we can in the Free West, and it's happy to know our opponents can't. We cracked open several bottles of wine and relaxed.
With all of your limbs still intact, thank God.
With all my limbs still intact.
All right. Now, Douglas Murray of the Center for Social Cohesion. You're listening to him on Secure Freedom Radio. Tell us what to make of all of this. You're in Britain. You're in London, I take it. Mm-hmm. You're in one of the most, if not the most, Western and civilized nations on the planet. And you're engaging in discourse with people who seek to impose Sharia law on your country. And you're in a situation where you have every reason to fear for your life. What are we to make of both this specific incident that you've escaped, I'm happy to say, intact and obviously unbowed, but what are we to make of what this says about what's happening in Britain?
Well, I think it's not just a problem for Britain, it's a problem we have across the globe at the moment, which is the literalist, fundamentalist interpreters of Islam are on the rise. They by no means speak for all of Islam, but they speak for a radical fringe which is making itself louder and louder. What we additionally, I think, have to take seriously is something which I think is important for all of us to sort of keep in mind, which is the following. A lot of people say these are loud mouths. When they say it, they're just, talking. These guys aren't just talking. When they say it, they mean it. When they say, as Mr. Choudary did last night to his followers, that they want to take over Britain and impose Sharia law, they mean it. When members of his group who have been involved in jihadi violence, they don't just say it, these guys, they mean it. There is such a temptation for people in free societies to believe effectively that these are just sort of wacky ideas which add something interesting to the mix. And
just another multicultural point of view.
Exactly, just another lovely spice to the dish. But this spice has made the whole thing
toxic.
Sour.
Yeah. Douglas, you're speaking to an American audience, obviously, and most of them, I'm sure, at least I would hope, are horrified by what you've just described. But if you could, as you did a moment ago, actually, but even more specifically, what should we in America be making of this? I suggested in my lead-in that what's happening to you today is on its way to us. Is that fair? Would you say that's an exaggeration? Would you warn that it's faster coming than we think?
Absolutely. People can have no idea of how slowly this slips as well. There were people journalists who were there last night, seasoned journalists, who said they'd never seen anything like this and never thought they would on the streets of Britain. The point about this is that societies don't die, liberal democracies don't die by some cataclysmic event. They don't. By and large, we don't have a threat of tanks rolling over our borders, of planes coming in and soldiers taking over our cities. That's not how liberal societies are going to die. They die by suicide, they die by 1,000 cuts, and they die by the slow slippage of rights. When you go down the slide and you don't know why you shouldn't give up the next thing, you can find no rational reason not to give up the next thing.
Especially when they're all sort of minor concessions, incrementally offered up.
Today it's a little thing about a food requirement. Tomorrow it's something about free speech being curtailed or a blasphemy law.
Something in the schools.
You can't find what the moment was where you actually lost. And I think that's what we have to bear in mind on these things, is that the rights which we cherish were not acquired overnight, and they aren't lost overnight. They are lost as they were acquired, bit by bit.
Yes.
And we have to be every bit as adamant in the defense of them today as our predecessors were in instituting them before.
Well, I couldn't imagine it being said better, Douglas, or being said with more authority, especially in light of your recent experience. And I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, that this is not a one-off thing. As Douglas indicated, he is working with his colleagues at the Center for Social Cohesion day in and day out to document this steady erosion of Britain's freedoms and to try, through calling attention to them, through offering the most effective of counter-arguments, to see what can be done to turn this around. And I thank you, Douglas, not only for joining us today to lay bare just how advanced the rot is in your country, but for awakening us here at Secure Freedom Radio, and I hope our countrymen more generally, to the dangers that are in the offing for all of us. I commend you for your courage. I thank you for your leadership, and I most especially want to tell you how much I appreciate you being with us here at Secure Freedom Radio. All the best. We'll have you back soon. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same station. Stay tuned. Thank you.
From the nation's capital, SwissAmerica.com has presented Secure Freedom Radio with Frank Gaffney.